As always, we start with L'chaim, everybody. And for those of you who are repeat offenders here, joining class, you'll recall that the first few sentences that come out of my mouth are always similar, and I hope they stay that way. And that is, this is by far the most amazing Parsha you're ever going to experience in your life. And this week is certainly not the exception, because it really is the crescendo of this moment between Joseph and his brothers, and the reunification, the stability, all the good things start to happen right now, from all the pain and all the suffering and all the abandonment and rifts between brothers who ultimately are the tribes of Israel, and it wasn't just a rift. I mean, it was pretty rough stuff, as we know from the last few weeks, and it all comes together and it all slowly starts to make sense, literally in this week's Torah portion. There's a lot to say, and there's a lot to unpack when it comes to Joseph, but I'm going to, as our format is, I'll share something, and Reuven will share something, and we each may or may not take a comment on each other, and then of course we open it up to the class to take to give questions, ask questions, etc. So I'm going to share just one idea on the story of Joseph, and hopefully it'll resonate. So we have the moment. This is the moment where Joseph starts to reveal his identity, and the question is why all the twists and turns? There's a lot going on that Joseph really seems to almost be toying with his brothers. We know right away that he recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. And the first thing he does is he accuses them of being spies. And he throws them all in prison for 3 days. Then he lets them out, but keeps Shimon inside. And then, after that, he says to them that I'm only going to let you go if you bring down Benjamin. And they're having difficulties with that, and they're fighting about that situation. They can't bring down Benjamin, and they're making excuses why they can't bring down Benjamin. And my father only has one son. He already lost one son from that wife, and they're sputtering, so to speak. And then, of course, there's a whole setup where he sets them back with their money that they came to buy the grain. They go back, something strange. They came with money to buy grain. The money wasn't taken from them. They have the grain and the money. It's very confusing. They go back to Jacob to try to bring down Benjamin. Jacob won't hear from it. He says, I can't lose another one. Judah finally steps up and says, I'll take care of him. I will manage him completely. It's all on me. They go back to Joseph. In the meantime, Joseph is going out to a closet, to a side room, crying because he can't handle his own emotions, because he knows what's happening. We talk about, a mixed emotions and complete discord going on in a family unit over here. Why? Why did he just sit down with them, maybe get a good therapist and say, listen, let's bygones be bygones. We have our opportunity to right the ship. No, it's a whole complicated twists and turns that keep on going back and forth. And then finally, we know that when Benjamin comes back with Judah, he gives Benjamin 5 times the amount of food and gifts that he gives to everybody else. And sure enough, he goes ahead and plants a goblet in Benjamin's sack, and then he says, okay, he's a thief. I got to take him as a prisoner. I got to take him as a slave. And to that, Judah steps up in, and Judah says, you can't take him as a slave. He's the only son left to my father's wife, Rachel, because the other one died. And if you take him, their souls are the souls are bound within each other, and he won't be able to handle it. This is what Judah, the one who sold Joseph, is now telling Joseph about his full-fledged brother, Benjamin. At that point, Joseph can't take it anymore, and he reveals himself, and he says the famous lines, Ani Yosef Odavichai. I am Joseph, is my father still alive? They say he is. He says, go fetch dad, go bring him back. And there's then the reconciliation begins. So again, the question that I asked in the beginning of the class is, why? Why this whole convoluted process to reconciliation? And so there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of answers that are given to this. Some people say that the reason why is because to exact punishment. I think there's a either Nachmanides, or I have to look it up, or another medrash says, Joseph wants to show them Mida Keneged Mida. They sold him, and what they went through, he wants to really show them what that's about. But that's kind of shot down because we know how much Joseph cries through the whole time. He's in pain. He cries more than anybody else. We know Abraham cries, but Joseph cries more than anybody. He cries almost 5 times in this process alone. So someone who's crying so much, who's so emotionally affected by this moment, he's not looking to give them punishment. So it has to be something else. So Maimonides, very interestingly, there's Maimonides talks about the idea of teshuvah. And Maimonides has a 3-step program for teshuvah. And it says that Maimonides learns the 3-step program of teshuvah from Joseph. So Joseph creates this perfect package, this perfect scenario, this elaborate scheme in order for the brothers to do a proper teshuvah, complete teshuvah. Hold on a second. And what's the scheme? So there's the way teshuvah works really is, repentance is, there has to be 3 parts of repentance. The first part of repentance is that we have regret of what we did wrong. That's the first part. The next part of repentance is that we commit to never doing it again in the future. Okay, so it's charat ala avar, right? And then mekan ala haba, we will not do anything in the future, the same mistake. And then there's something called teshuvah gemura. The third step, the highest step is what? The highest step is to really, really get into a place where you're tested by the same mistake, the same sin, and you're not scared of heaven, you're not scared of hell, you're not scared of punishment or reward. You simply are a changed person. You have no interest in that sin again. So, of course, present company excluded, but let's say someone enjoys, I know it never happened to anybody, a good cheeseburger, chas v'shalom, should never happen. And they're a big fan of Mickey D's. And finally, they realize that maybe they should be a little bit more careful with their intake, and they're committing not to go ahead and eat milk and meat together, or eat treif together. So every time they pass a McDonald's and something pops up in their mind where they used to go there, and they keep on driving because they know that that's not a part of their life anymore, they're into a whole new space, they're into a whole new existence, that's tshuva gemura. That's complete tshuva. Because they already regret about the past, they commit not to do in the future, but they actually experience a scenario again. So here we have a wild situation. We have where Yosef goes ahead and creates, Yosef is looking for this real healing to take place. Because there is a gnawing question that I should throw in right now, maybe even a little earlier, is Joseph knew was a second in command. Why didn't he seek out his father? Okay, if he's in prison, he can't. And if he's a slave, he can't. But there was approximately 14 years that he was the man. So why does he could have sent a messenger? He's busy himself. Go hire Amazon and send a Uber and go pick up Jacob and bring him to Egypt and have a l'chaim and have a farbring. And it's his father. What does he wait 14 years for? And the 14 years he waits, he finally comes. There's a hunger. They're hungry. They need food. They come down, and now he's messing with them. He's accusing them of being spies, and he's planting things in their saddles. And what? So we say that Joseph goes through this very, very elaborate plan in order to create a complete healing. Joseph, recognizing the sensitive soul that he is, in many ways, he may be you could say it, maybe it's the wrong language, he's a step ahead of his brothers. He sees a little deeper than they do. They're one-dimensional. They see God in terms of shepherd and separatist from the outside world. Joseph has a different, game plan. Joseph is not scared to enmesh himself and immerse himself in Egypt, in the secular society. He can still maintain his internal fire, even though all the insanity is going on around him. We know he was challenged, whether it was last week, the week before, by Potiphar's wife. As a young man, not a problem. He's able to hold strong. Maybe it was a challenge, but ultimately he was victorious. So he's able to handle this outside world. His brothers don't see that. So here, Joseph wants to teach them an experience that's going to resonate, that's going to bring them around. And so he thinks a little bit further, he sees the world a little bit deeper, and he's committing to getting them to going ahead and doing a complete tshuva. So how does it work? So the first time they come down and he accuses them of spies, we hear the murmurings amongst the tribes saying, look what's going on. We're getting punished for what we did. We sold our brother. Now we're in trouble. So you see, there's the first level of tshuva. There's regret. They recognize that maybe the moves that they made on Joseph was not the best moves, was not the right moves. That's step one in your tshuva program. Step two is Joseph realizes that if he tells the brothers, this is pretty clever, right? He tells the brothers, I'm only going to take care of you if you come down with your brother Binyamin, this brother that you talk about. He knows that the only way Jacob will agree to this is if they completely agree that something will never happen to Benjamin in the future. Jacob needs that guarantee, which Judah gives him. Says nothing happens. So he knows when he sees Benjamin the second time they come back, he says, wait a second, clearly they had to convince dad that they will never, ever let their brother depart from them and guarantee with their own lives, which Judah, of course, did. So that's the future. They will never, ever do that again and lose a brother like that. So he already accomplishes step 2 of the tshuva program. And step 3 of the tshuva program, step 3 of the tshuva program is a little bit more, I would say, most fascinating. You see, Joseph knows that his mother is Rachel, and Joseph knows that he only has one other brother, Benjamin. And he also knows that that Rachel was favored by the father. And the brothers know it. This was a wonderful Jewish dysfunctional family, you could say. Everybody knew the favoritism going on, and it created problems. Us, as the Hasidic scholars, try to, explain why there was favoritism and the reason behind favoritism, and it's really good for everybody. Fine, but on the face of it, it didn't look so good. And so, why did they sell him? Because they were jealous. The children of Leah were not excited about the child of Rachel. So, what does Joseph do? He specifically plants a goblet into the saddlebag of Benjamin, the son of Rachel, who passes when he was born. And if you look at the verse in the text, and I hope that you have an opportunity to do that from now through Shabbat, what does Judah say? Judah says that this is the child who is loved by his father, and refers to the child of the mother. It wasn't his own mother. Remember, it was, the wife of my father, like emphasizing that it was Rachel's child. And the other brother passed away, and this is his only connection. This is what Judah's claim. This is the only connection that he has to his wife, Rachel, is this Benjamin, because Joseph's not around. So Judah goes out of his way in a moment where he could easily have said, this kid, he's not my brother. He's Rachel's child. He's not Leah's child. He stole the goblet. Throw him in prison. We did it once before. We'll do it again. Let's get rid of these guys. No, he's positioned in the same scenario to either give up or give away this brother, but he's not worried about punishment. He's not worried about, he's a different man at this point. He's changed. He went through the hell. He went through what it was like to put the family in disgrace. There was complete regret for the past. There was complete commitment of the ways of the future. And of course, now we see that Joseph, in his genius scheme, elaborate scheme, puts them in a position where they can actually be tested in the same scenario again, and of course, come away successful. So we know that in looking at the scenario, it could have easily have said that, yes, maybe Joseph should have just sent a messenger to the father. But there's something in Hasidic terminology. We refer to the first psych book of Chabad Hasidism, known as the Tanya. Rabbi Steinsaltz, who passed away this year, has a great book called The Longer, Shorter Way, because the Alter Rebbe talks about the Tanya as a method to connect to godliness as the longer, short way, as opposed to the short, long way. You see, the short, long way of connecting, at least in this situation, would have been, okay, let's get dad here, and dad will misses me, he'll hug me, we'll have a moment, a Hollywood moment, a Hollywood ending, but all the rifts and all the residue between the brothers and himself would have not been healed. Joseph chooses to go the long, short way. He goes out of his way to make this a long, painful process, but now when they reconcile, it's not just about Joseph being the beloved son, reconciling with his father. Now all the brothers are together. They're all united. They're all on the same page. They're all the children of Jacob. There is no differences anymore. They all really, really worked hard through their own process of tshuva and healing to be the same. For that, Joseph was willing to go ahead and even go into his own pain. You don't think Joseph wanted to be reunited with his father? He didn't want to be reunited with his brothers. He didn't understand his own power and his ability. But he knew that this is going to be the nation of the Jewish people that's going to have to fight through some difficult times. And they're going to go, there's going to be in Egypt, and there's going to be other pharaohs, there's going to be pyramids, there's going to be a slave period. And only through that do they ultimately have the strength to ultimately be the Jewish nation, receive the Torah, and ultimately go to Israel. And in order for us to be healthy and be able to experience that level of success, that level of godliness, to be a light unto the nations, healing can't be a quick fix. Healing, tshuva, has to be a difficult process. So many of us so often say, you know, it's maybe for someone else. I'm not that religious. I'm not that kind of a Jew. How often do we all tell ourselves that story? We write about different rabbis that do like the vaccine. Oh, that kind of rabbi, this kind of rabbi. Even rabbis refer to other rabbis and have that same dilemma. Let's not make that mistake. Each of us have to go through our own teshuvah, our own process, our own healing. And let's not look for a quick fix. Everybody has a story to share. Joseph's story is quite fascinating. And, you know, I'll conclude with the final expression. You know, the very end, Joseph tells his brothers, he says, don't be upset. Let's see if I have it over here in the Chumash. He says, he says to them, he says, don't be upset at me. He says, Ki, because this is the reason I was sent to Egypt. In other words, to go through this process. But Ki in Hebrew can have multiple meanings. Not only that this is the reason, but because I went to Egypt. In other words, this process of this journey that I went through is what made me Joseph, is what allowed me to go ahead and be enlightened, to have reconciliation, to have teshuvah. And so everybody should embrace their journey. Don't be freaked out if it seems a little long. Don't be freaked out if you don't know if you should take the vaccine. Don't take the vaccine. COVID is over, not over, a new strain, not a strain. These are journeys that we're all going through. Don't be scared of it. This is what's going to make us stronger. This is what we need to tap in a little bit deeper and not be scared of the challenges that we're going through. We've been through many challenges as a people. Let's double down. Let's dig in, learn more Torah, get on more Zoom, and let's learn from Joseph and his brothers to overcome difficulty, to ultimately find harmony and become what is to be 3,000 years later still the Jewish people talking about him. So l'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim.
Amen. Wonderful summary of the whole two parshiot together. So let's focus on some of the details, so we can see how Mayshe's interpretation really makes sense of so much of the data. Normally, there are three ways of looking at the whole story. Some people look at it as a story of revenge. Joseph is getting back at his brothers. One reading, which Mayshe mentioned. The other is looking at the whole story as wish fulfillment. That is, Joseph had dreams. He sees his brothers bowing down to him, and now sees the opportunity of fulfilling all his dreams. After all, his dream was about agriculture and people bowing down to him. He's now the minister of agriculture. So clearly part of the dream has been fulfilled. Now he has to look for the rest of the dream being fulfilled. Ultimately, he has to bring his father down, just like it says, the moon and the sun will bow down to him. And therefore, it's nothing more than dream fulfillment. The third interpretation is in Mayshe's. It's really, he's setting it up a story to allow them to do tshuva. And to do tshuva, you have to be in the same situation as you once were. So Mayshe gave the example, you still have to have a passion or a desire to eat the cheeseburger. If you don't have the desire, it doesn't count. So the Rambam says, a person has to be the same vitality in doing tshuva that he did when he sinned. So if a person sins at the age of 20 and does tshuva at the age of 80, we don't say that he abandoned sin, we say that sin abandoned him. It's a little bit different. Meaning, he has to feel the same way. Therefore, Joseph has to structure a situation where it would evoke the possibility of tshuva with the same feeling. So first, he has to find out is Jacob doting over his brother Benjamin? And does Jacob love his brother Benjamin? So when he finds out that Jacob refuses to send Benjamin down with the other brothers, he knows that the family situation is not changed at all. This allows for the chance of tshuva. Since Jacob is not changed and Benjamin is a replacement for Joseph, the question is, has the brothers changed? And that's what he has to test. Because if the brothers have changed, then they deserve forgiveness. And if not, not. So what does he do? First, he tests their fraternal solidarity with him. That's the first test, when he first comes down. Then, strangely, he puts a goblet in their bags. Why a goblet? Well, goblets in Antiquity were made out of silver. Why is silver significant? Because they sold Joseph for silver. So as soon as they say that silver, what do they say? Oh, God has found out the crime of his servants. In other words, they're so wrecked with guilt that anything that reminds them of what they did, they realize that God is giving them measure for measure. In fact, when they're in the pit and Joseph is looking down at them, what do they remind themselves of? When Joseph was in the pit and they looked up, Joseph looked up and they turned their back on him. So instead of being at the top of the pit, they are at the bottom of the pit. And right then, Reuben says, what? You see that? We're paying for his blood. Hinei damo nidrash, which means everything which happens reminds them of that one event they've been trying to forget for now over 17 years. And then before Judah encounters Joseph, he says, Manitz tadak. How are we going to acquit ourselves? Elohim matzah et avon avadecha. God has found out the sin of your servants. And the word servants is in the plural. If it was in the singular, then we refer to the sin of Benjamin. They caught Benjamin. That's your servant. But it's the servants in the plural, which means Judah is not talking about what Benjamin did. He now realizes that everything which is happening to them is because of what they did to their brother. Therefore, he does not think of the specific sin of his brother Benjamin. He's aware that we're all wrecked with guilt and we're paying for what we did to our brother. Therefore, Elohim matzat avon avadecha, your servants in the plural. And therefore, what do we do? We should all be slaves to you, not Benjamin, because the crime is not really what Benjamin did. What started this whole thing is the crime that we did. And therefore, we're all guilty. We should be the servants. Now, what's remarkable is that the next Parsha for today, Parshat Vayigash, in 15 verses, 4 words get repeated over and over again, up to 40 times. Hanar, the young kid, who's Benjamin. Av, the father, who's Yaakov. Adon, the master, who's Yosef. And Eved, Yehuda. Over 40 times do these terms appear. It's almost 1/4 of all the words. And therefore the issue is the Nar, Benjamin, Av, the father, Adon, the master, Yosef, or the Eved, Yehuda. And he starts off almost like Abraham. When Abraham confronted God on Sodom, the verb is Vayigash. He came forward and challenged God. Then he said, Chalila lecha, far be it from you. The exact same words that is used in the previous verse. Joseph says, Chalila li, masot davar zeh. Clearly, I would not do such a thing. And finally, Judah says to Joseph, Al yichar apcha, don't get angry. The exact same words that Abraham used vis-a-vis God. So Judah is really a man of Abrahamic proportions. And I'm going to contend now that the hero of the story is Judah. He's the one who rises to greatness, and his rise to greatness provokes a similar response on the side of Yosef. So what does he tell us the whole story? Constantly calls the kid Hanar, doesn't mention his name, right? Because the word Nar is the same verb used with regard to Yosef, when he was his brothers. Hoya Nar. Almost, I'm using the words which recall the past, and they all have a double meaning. The word makes sense in light of its context, but the word reverberates way beyond its context. So Nar was one time Yosef. Now Nar is who? Benjamin. it is clear that Benjamin is replacing whom? Yosef. Therefore, whatever they do to Benjamin is what they would do to Yosef if he were still around. But they've changed totally, because now he realizes two things. First, Ahev, his father loves Benjamin. Secondly, Nafsho Kshura B'Nafsho, as Mayshe quoted before. In other words, he realizes the life of the father is dependent upon the life of Benjamin. Now, his love for Benjamin probably even exceeded his love for Yosef, because his love for Yosef is part of transferred love for his wife. His beloved wife died. Who's he turned his love against? Yosef. But now Yosef and his mother are gone. So of the three, the only remaining person is whom? Benjamin. So while he sent Yosef out to find out his brothers, to lish'ol bishlomam, to find out about their welfare, he doesn't do that with Benjamin. He's taking no risks. And then along comes Yehuda and says, Arev, I will be his pledge. Now that word Arev is also a double entendre, because that's the exact same words that Yehuda used when he went with Tamar. She said, give me a pledge that you'll pay me. And there he gave him what? His license and his credit card, as it were. But the word Arev. So this once Yehuda took an Arev, a pledge, or gave a pledge, now he himself is becoming that pledge. I pledged to my father that in no condition would I leave what? Benjamin here. And therefore he rises to what I call sacrificial love. I think it's the only case we have that in Genesis. What do you mean sacrificial love? I am willing to take his stead, to stand in his place. Let Benjamin go, and I'll stay. Now look at the very last verse. It's just remarkable. He says, Ki ech ele alavi, how can I possibly go back to dad? And the young boy is not with me. Pen ere bara asherim sadavi, lest I see the evil which will afflict my father and will cause what? His death. Now you have to realize Judah is the one who suggested the selling of Yosef. So if anybody's responsible for all this, because they realize all this is happening to them because of what they did to Yosef. So who's primarily responsible? Yehuda. Instead of denying his responsibility or blaming somebody else as could be done, he takes on full responsibility. He says, look, I caused it. I'm going to solve it. And if I cannot solve it by all of us going back, then I will be the sacrificial offering. I will take his place. So Judah arises to what I call moral greatness and expresses a sacrificial love. And his last word is Avi, my father. When Joseph sees that Judah is willing to sacrifice himself, and of course, when he tells the whole story, the irony is that Joseph knows exactly who he's talking about. But Judah does not know that Joseph knows what he's saying. So when Joseph realizes the moral greatness of his brother, and he's enamored by it, and his love for his father, and is willing to sacrifice himself to keep his father around. So his love for his father evokes the love of Joseph for his father. And when he sees this, he says he can't hold it in. He starts crying, and he just breaks down. Now he breaks down, I think, for two reasons. Number one, the love that Judah expresses for his father is the same love he has. We're both brothers, and we love our father. Secondly, he sees that his brother Judah, who wanted to sell him, now wants to replace Benjamin, which means he wants to totally compensate. He's totally an active tshuva. Well, if he acts to that moral level, then Joseph has to rise to that moral level. Then it says, he told him exactly who he is, and it says, Lo yachlu echav lanototo. And his brothers could not answer him. Could you imagine having got rid of your brothers 30 years ago, and suddenly he shows up and has power of life and death over you? They're scared to death. They're shaking in their boots. They can't even lo yachu echav lanototo. Those words, lo yachu echav lanototo, repeat the words which are said way back, which says, Lo yachlu dabro shalom. 17 years earlier, they couldn't even say what? Shalom to him. And again, they can't talk to him. And when they start talking to him, it brings about reconciliation. Now the question is, and my last question is, why was Joseph able to rise to such moral greatness? He doesn't start off as a morally great kid. I mean, he's a kind of kid who tells it, not only has dreams, but he tells the dreams. It looks like dreams of illusions of grandeur. He looks in the beginning like some spoiled brat. He walks around with special garments, and whenever he sees his brother, he puts on those special garments to get them angry. He doesn't, all right, he only rises to moral greatness in the end. And I think it's very simple. What if you were Joseph? You start off being the favorite of your father. Next scene, you're in a pit, thrown there by your brothers. Next scene, you're sold to Egypt, and you rise to the house, height to the house of Potiphar. Next scene, you're in a dungeon. Next scene, you rise even higher. Everything in your life is up, down, up, down. Joseph looks at his life and says, this ain't a normal life. Nobody goes through all these things and survives. There must have been a reason behind it. And all the tragedies which afflicted me, there's a guiding light. Otherwise, how can you explain I was once a slave and now I'm what? The master of Egypt. How can you explain my brothers who wanted to sell me as a slave and now they're willing to become what? Slaves to me. This total reversal, which I thought I did by my own talent, although I attribute it to God, I suddenly realized that I'm in a play. And this play is written by God. And our brothers and me are pawns. And the goal is to bring us down to Egypt to fulfill the promise made to Abraham, but even more, to guarantee sustenance. So he says, you didn't do this, even though you meant to do this. All right, rather, right? God did it. So once he realized that he's part of a drama and he's the major actor in a divine play, there is no place here for small emotions or just when he's getting back at your brother. He rises to the occasion. Now, his brothers did not go through what he went through. Therefore, they can't believe that he would forgive them because in their own mind, the crime is unforgivable. And they remember years later when their father dies, when you commit an unforgivable crime, the phrase unforgivable means you can't forgive yourself. They could not forgive themselves. Therefore, they don't believe that Yosef forgave them. But Yosef sees God's hand in all this. Therefore, he says, while you meant it one way, you were pawns and part of a divine play. He rises to moral greatness, and there's no evidence of rancor, no evidence of revenge, no evidence of getting back to them. There's total reconciliation. So the reconciliation, the whole program starts with Yosef. It is realized because Judah rises to moral greatness. Joseph matches Yehuda's moral greatness and extends his love and care for his brother and father, not remembering or even not recalling what they did to him, because they had to do that to bring it about. So while the psychological motivations are clear, what was not clear and only clear to Joseph is that we're all part of a theological plan. And we only see the plan at the end. Up to this moment, the only person who sees the plan is Joseph. Therefore, he rises to greatness. His brothers don't yet see the plan and cannot understand how Joseph can be so gracious to them in light of they were. That's why I call it sacrificial love. Judah is willing to replace Benjamin with himself. He's willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of Benjamin. Such sacrificial love evokes in Joseph tremendous admiration. And what does he do? Breaks down crying, thinking about his father.
Excellent. Gewalt.
But we actually, if you look at the two stories, both of us complement each other, right?
Sure.
I think Mayshe gave us the the big picture, and the big picture and the small details actually correlate extraordinarily well.
Yep, yeah, very nice. And it ends off with the pasuk. Joseph continues to assuage them and their fears. This is the moment where he rises. Maybe the toughest challenge in certain ways. You know, to reconcile with your brothers in an honest format. And they can only continue to be a nation once that happens. The unity is required amongst the brothers in order to be a family. There's no other way.